we always hear the journey from a female perspective. When you are single, you finally fall in love, you get married, then you get married, it may not work out, then you're going through a separation, from the separation to a divorce, and then you're single again. And I don't know, it feels like we have so many assumptions and so many stereotypes, and we just want to think that men don't go through anything. But instead of me talking about it, I thought it'd be really good to talk to someone that I just reconnected with. Right. So this is going to be a grown, raw, unfiltered conversation from a male perspective.
Yes, you see these gray hairs? I've seen a thing or two.
So we're going to talk to Mr. Scott Bugs Allen. What's the first, I guess, assumption or misconception about when a man first wants to get married? Like, do men think about marriage?
Men think about marriage. They think about the type of woman that they want to spend the rest of their lives with, even while they're out there spending short periods of their lives with a lot of women.
Really?
Yes, even then, yes.
Is it all men or certain type of men?
Every man ultimately thinks about what the one woman who will cause him to commit is like. And he may not find her, he may not immediately be searching for her, but he's always thinking about her. Because ultimately, he knows one will find him or he will find her, and he will have to be prepared to deal with that. Yeah.
Do you think, like one of the things I always thought is that men don't want to get married. That's like the last thing. I know for the most part they do, but it seems like in the single world, they're not really ready to commit. Or is it like you said, they have this one woman in mind?
Depending on how the man was raised, he might be conditioned to forego marriage. And it may be social pressure not to make that decision too soon. But in his heart, really, most men would rather spend that long period of time with one woman as opposed to multiple.
Really?
Really. But what happens is that society paints this picture that men are supposed to sow their wild oats and be men of the world, and they understand the ratio of men to women, so they see that as an advantage that is exploited by both men and women.
That's true. That's true.
And so they fall into that fallacy that you're supposed to go out and just sample everything you can sample until you get quote unquote trapped. And then you do the right thing. That was the old traditional sense. And unfortunately, a lot of those bad ideas are passed on to younger men, either through media, through television, through images, and so forth. And so once a young man adopts that posture, he resists what he ultimately knows for as long as he can, until he meets a woman that eventually gives him no other options.
It's interesting that you said how men are pushed to sow their oats and women aren't.
Correct.
Do you feel that, I guess, sampling early as a man, does that help you later in life? Or do you think that might hurt the situation?
It doesn't really help you later in life, because what happens is if you start devaluing women early, it creates a pattern of devaluation of women. And what happens is that you start to justify it. Well, she ain't this and she ain't that, and some songwriter said these women ain't loyal. These
hoes ain't loyal.
I didn't want to say it because that's not my nature to disrespect women at all.
We grown in sex and we keep.
I know, but I've raised daughters, so I'm not going to speak that way about women. But yeah, I mean, what happens is you get into this pattern and you get away with things for so long. And what happens is and unfortunately, some women become aware of this pattern and they devalue themselves to make themselves more appealing to the men, because they also know the ratio and they want to be on the winning side. So they think. And so they start evaluating themselves. So it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, he has less respect for her. She lowers her standard to make sure that she outpaces the other women who are also, in line for that partnership. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. What happens though, if a man is conditioned to respect and appreciate women earlier in life, like myself, he's more inclined to get married earlier. Like I originally, my first marriage happened at the tender age of 20. I have a 33-year-old daughter, okay? But because I had the type of mother and the type of sisters who embodied what I was looking for, I was more apt to seek out a woman for those qualities. Didn't find it the first time, but I was more apt to seek her out than I would have been had I not seen the model of womanhood that I grew up with.
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because I said in a comment on another video that when men publicly say that they hate black women and they won't date a black woman, I asked, what does the black mother of that man feel like? And I said in this comment that I wouldn't mind interviewing some black mothers who have men that publicly say they hate black women and that they won't date them. So it's interesting that you said your mother was such a great example, and that helped you to kind of model the kind of woman you wanted to marry. And it's really interesting because that comment, it has gotten a lot of male attention, and they kind of came after me a little bit. Like, I don't know, it was a problem with that question. Like, why is it that, it's always got to be the mother? Why is it? And I was just like, well, why can't I just question it? So with men who's totally opposite of you, but with men who publicly say that they don't want to marry a black woman and they're black, and that they hate black women, they're going to date outside of their race, do you think it has something to do with their relationship with their mother?
Yes, and their fathers. Because they either grew up watching a man dishonor black women, or they watched a woman put a man ahead of them. So if a woman puts a man ahead of her child, whether he's their biological father or not, they learn that not her, but they learn that they are secondary. They learn that they are less worthy. They learn that they are not the priority. And so it's hard to prioritize someone who doesn't make you a priority. It's hard to prioritize someone who doesn't make you a priority. So they end up turning on this black woman who forsake them for the sake of a relationship or a substance or any number of things that she valued above putting their children first. So that's where that comes from. It doesn't just come from, men don't just develop a hate of black women. Because men who were raised by honorable, strong, proud black women learn to admire those traits in those women that he sees. My mother, my sisters, all strong, achieving, loving, caring, properly prioritizing black women. And so I was conditioned that, okay, this is the type of queen I want to find for myself. When that doesn't happen, you find out that, oh, well, if she ain't, then I don't believe that any of them are.
Because,
Right.
And it goes both ways. Fathers with
too.
The daughters.
If a man is not respecting, protecting, admiring, loving the black woman, then the son doesn't see that as the thing to do. Because thank God I had a great father. He and my mom did not make it long term. But I've never seen my father disrespect a woman. I've never seen my father raise a hand to a woman, speak to a woman in a demeaning way. I've never seen it.
Right.
I can't say for certain that it never happened, because I wasn't every.
You never saw that.
I never saw it. He never patterned that behavior in front of me, or any other woman that I saw him involved with. He was always respectful. He was always gracious. He was always protecting. He was always providing. So I never saw any reason not to do the things that I saw my father do. My mother never spoke ill of him. My mother was always a nurturing, teaching, caring, sharing woman. So
that speaks to something too, especially with younger adults. I like what he's saying here where, you got to pick up the little notes when you hear them. So not speaking ill will and not yelling and arguing in front of the kids is very important.
Yes.
And I know too often, unfortunately, situations, I think there's too many lust babies.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you met at the club, you were vibing, there was no self-control, you had sex, you got pregnant, you decided to keep it for whatever reason, and now you're forced to raise this child. So just the foundation alone, unfortunately, is not solid. Right. So when you are already on a really rocky foundation, then there's a lot of arguing and there's a lot of name calling, and a lot of times you do it in front of the kid and you think the kid is not listening. Kids hear and feel all of that, and it shapes who they are.
Kids are seeds, literally and figuratively. So if the seed is planted on, poor ground, then the nurturing that's required for the seed to grow healthy, it's just not there. If a seed is planted on fertile ground and it's nurtured and it's watered and it's raised and it's cultivated and it's pruned, then it becomes a well-functioning, not perfect, but a well-functioning adult. Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of kids were conceived, were planted on ground that just wasn't healthy. It was toxic ground.
Toxic. And unfortunately, it's continuing because too many adults are just selfish. They're only thinking about themselves, and they're not thinking about the life that they're bringing into this world. And that's something that I really am going to be talking a lot about in my other videos. I'm not going to hit you on the head over the head with it today, because we're going to get into some other good stuff. But I'm really, I just don't understand. It's okay to have sex, and it's okay to have unprotected sex every now and then, but really you got to learn self-control, because you're bringing another child into this world, and it's not fair to the child, it's not fair to you, it's not fair to the man, it's not fair to anybody's future, simply because you didn't have any self-control. Really try to learn how to have self-control, please. So I'm just going to leave that part there.
Yeah.
So now going back to finally you getting married. So when you get married, you were saying something when we were talking on the phone. I loved how you was talking about the investment.
Yeah.
So can you go and talk to us about that?
The investment, and we're not talking about monetary, superficial investment. We're talking about an investment of who you are and what you are into a relationship. So what happens is two people make an investment of themselves into a relationship in expectance of a return on that investment. And what happens is, inadvertently, and this is completely natural, sometimes one person invests a lot more than the other. Now, one person may invest more financially, another person may invest more emotionally. Maybe either of them invest whatever, physically, even spiritually. But what happens is that when things tend to sour, people tend to reassess their investment, and then they ask themselves if they've invested too much. And then the next thing you know, if it's not suiting their needs at any given point, forget about the commitment. They don't see a return on their investment. They want to divest. And that's what happens when people break up. I mean, they simply divest of the relationship, and for whatever reason. Now, the problem is that you can always, the same way you justify the investment, you justify the divestment.
Exactly.
So, whatever reason, and that's why when people misuse the term and the concept of falling in love, right? If you can fall in, you can fall out.
Exactly.
But if you look at it as a decision based on, based on a will to make the relationship work, then maybe you won't get to the point of divestment when things get really tough.
I think with marriage today, I think a lot of people, I hope anyway, that a lot of people are willing to take their time because the investment is very interesting. Some people marry for different types of investment.
Yes.
Some people marry for material things only. There's so many people who are married simply because the person has things or money and they feel that sense of security.
Yeah.
Never really getting to know the person.
Yeah.
They can have all the money in the world, but if they're mean and evil and treating you horribly, is it worth it? So I feel like a lot of times people don't really understand the investment that is on both sides.
Yeah.
Going with Lenore, who I had on my show before, she made a really good statement that, ladies, if you have the money, if you have the finances and you're investing that, then what can he invest? What you don't have? Maybe it's the emotional, maybe it's the spiritual, maybe it's something else. So you have to be careful. For me, I always think marriage should be looked at as a business plan. The same way with kids. You are getting into a situation where you're investing something. You want a return on your investment. And it's supposed to be long-term. You want success. So if you deal with all of that early on, not to say everything's going to be perfect, but at least you don't have these assumptions. And I hate when people use the statement, oh, they changed. After we got married, they changed. Yeah. People don't change. They just show you who they are. Yeah,
they reveal.
More and
they
more.
Don't change.
Yeah.
And getting back to the investment, in the markets, people make investments based on the past history of a commodity. Unfortunately, emotions don't always allow us to do that. We make investments based on our gut, our feeling, our heart. So we don't invest necessarily based on the past performance of the investment. We make investments based on what we believe the future performance will be.
Now break that down in relationships. Give me an example in how you break that down into relationships.
In relationships, you go after the girl who looks great, laughs at your jokes, maybe likes to watch sports with you, maybe a little educated, has a degree, but she's not thinking about the future. She hasn't seen herself necessarily as a wife or a mother. She's a great girlfriend. You can go places, show her around. She makes you look good. She presents a great image, but she's not really a long-term partner. But the girl who's kind of like, new in town, scrappy, got big dreams, maybe she's developing something in herself that she hasn't developed before. Maybe she's got ideas that most people don't have. Little off-key, earthy, super ethnic. Maybe she's into, things that conventional wisdom says aren't important, and you dismiss her. And then you see her down the road and she's Oprah.
Exactly.
So you don't know. But if you take the time to learn, you'll find out who that woman is. You'll find out what she likes, what her qualities are, how the two of you might create something special, build an empire.
Right.
You just never know.
And so in that, what you're saying is like how you invest in the stocks and you do your research. Do your research on the type of person.
Exactly.
If you're attracted to a certain type of person, but they're not meeting your quote unquote checklist, take the time to invest who they are and see who else has been successful with that same kind of journey.
Yeah. Okay. And it's not always the market research of how they performed in the past, is what are their plans for the future? Because we didn't know that Google would be one of the largest tech companies on earth. We didn't know, short segue. When I was in middle school, I met Oprah, who was fresh out of college, who was hosting a TV show in Baltimore. Who knew that she was becoming the most powerful woman in media?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, here I am. I'm a middle school trumpet player, man. She comes to my middle school and she's on the guest list and she's on stage at one of our little assemblies, and just Oprah Winfrey from Channel 13 in Baltimore, 22 years old, you know. Hosting a show with a guy named Richard Sher, who's like a Baltimore media legend. But now, you know, she's bigger than life. You know, Richard's still in Baltimore. He's a great guy doing his thing. But you just don't know, because we didn't know what Oprah overcame to be where she was at 22 and what she had to overcome to get where she is at 65. You know. You just don't know.
Yeah,
you just don't know.
And I think people are investing in the wrong things. Too many times, unfortunately, it's all about vanity and what the person looks like. And just because she has a big butt, a small waist, you know, boobs and a smile does not make her a mother, does not make her a wife, does not make her loving and caring. Just because he has a Mercedes or the Bugatti or, you know, the watch and the shoes, and he's this rapper and he has all this money, does not make him a husband, does not make him a father. So those are the wrong investments, if you will, to look at.
You can miss it.
Just because of material things.
You can miss it.
So now you're in the marriage and you see that they're ready to divest.
Yeah.
What is it like for a man when they see that? What do you try to do? Do you try to hold on to it? Take us through that little bit of a journey.
Naturally, you at first, you know, you deny. Certainly, I've been good, you know. I've not been running the streets. Why would she want to leave me? I'm the good guy, because I know the bad guys out there. I could have been one. And there's not a whole lot of guys like, you know, we evaluate ourselves. We deny factors that may have led to her divestment, because we all have our faults, me included. And then we try to rationalize, well, if I do this, maybe we'll reconnect and we'll do that. And when that doesn't happen, you know, like any demise, you go through the stages of grief. You know, when trust me, men hurt when relationships end. We may not always express it. We may not tell all of our friends. We may not post it on social media, but we hurt. And we go through the stages of grief. We go through denial. We go through anxiety. We go through sadness. We go through anger, and then eventually we arrive at a place called acceptance, like you do with any other demise, whether it be a family member or, you know, or a friend. And once you get to acceptance, you start to reassess your own value. Like, okay, it didn't work, but I'm still this guy. I can still do this. I still have these qualities. I still want. I still value. I still appreciate women for the same reasons that I appreciated the last one. And if you take that approach, you can actually go forward in a healthy way. But if you get stuck on, these women ain't loyal.
Right.
Or this one did me dirty.
Right.
Or I didn't see that coming. Or they're all alike. You can never move on to the next chapter. And for some people, it happens very quickly. For some people, it happens over a long period of time, maybe even years. And if you're not careful, you end up going out, I hate to use this term, you go out anger dating, where you are just scorched earth, back to bad habits and bad decisions, and you leave a trail of mess behind you.
Yeah, and women do it too.
Yeah.
You know, women do it too. Okay, so after that, then you're going through the separation. And if you have kids, did you have to go through that with kids?
I've gone through it with kids.
How is that for a man?
That is the most difficult thing you'll ever do. It's one thing to be two single people when you lose each other, you lose a partner. But when you have children, you're losing a family. because typically the kids are going to stay with. Now I was fortunate with my oldest daughter. I gained custody of her after my first marriage broke, raised her as pretty much a single dad for the most part, and I didn't lose my family. My family just changed shape.
Okay.
Second time, I lost a family.
Okay.
My younger daughter, I lost her and her mother.
Okay.
And that's painful, because what happens is your family is part of your identity. I mean, it's who you are. You're this person's husband, you're this person's father, and you identify with being that. So when you lose that, you really lose a lot. And it's actually more painful. It takes a longer time to recover, because now you have to reassess yourself as a single person as opposed to a family man. And for those of us men who are family men, we know what that means. That is a source of pride, it's a source of honor, it's a source of joy, it is a source of identity. A little different when it's just two people partying, because it's easier. It's still painful, it's still a process, you still go through the same stages, but it's easier to reintroduce yourself as a single person when you are only leaving one person behind, or they're leaving you behind, whichever the case may be. So when you're a single survivor, it's much easier to reassert yourself back into, mainstream life as a single person. Yeah.
When there's a situation when the divorces, starting to happen, and the other parent is using the child against you, how do you talk to those men who are dealing with that? There's a lot of men out there who it didn't work out with the woman, and unfortunately the woman will use the child to punish you or to get back at you. Give them some advice on how to deal with that.
Oftentimes the bitter partner will poison the well. And unfortunately, the only tool you have at your disposal is time. Because what happens is that child is still in that environment, and the most dominant person in their life is the one that is, denigrating your character. Not much you can do about that, except what will eventually happen. The child will continue to grow, the child will continue to see, the child will continue to watch the environment around him or her. And at some point, the child will make their own decisions and assessments about who their mother is, who their father is.
What if the mother is, manipulator? What if she's
eventually that control can never continue forever? Eventually, the child's going to go on to college, discover what life is like on their own, learn some things from experience. They're going to make some mistakes on their own. And whether that child is, 20, 30, 35, eventually a light's going to come on. And if you, as a father, are still reaching out for that child, eventually you're going to reconnect, and then you're going to be able to tell your side of the story. They're going to see your perspective, and they're going to put it all together. They're going to do the math.
Right. That's a good point. I want you to just touch a little bit more on that when you say, because I know some men, it's just hard. After a while, you just can't take it anymore, and you just say, forget it. Yeah. So when you say you keep reaching out, how do they keep reaching out, and how can they take care of themselves? Because it has to hurt.
Yeah.
So how do they take care of themselves and continue to reach out?
You take care of yourself by continuing to live your life. You take care of yourself by being whatever kind of success, however you define success. You keep living, and you keep being the opposite of what that child is being told. You just keep being that. And one day that child will rediscover you and see that during your time apart, you've never stopped wanting to be that child's father. You've been reaching out. You've been maybe trying to reach the child through other relatives and trying to circumvent the barriers that bitter parent has put between you. And you'll start to do the math. What's going on can't be concealed forever. Truth is something that always manages to find its way to the surface, no matter how deeply it's buried. it will always find its way to the surface. And it may happen in a year, it may happen in 5, it may happen in 20 years, but it will eventually find its way to the surface. And that child reconnects with you, they will find out how you've been living and what what you've made of yourself, what you've become, and they will see who you are.
Right.
In contrast to what they've been told about you.
And what about when, let's say you have the kids on the weekend and the manipulation is happening and, it's all going. So let's say you still, for men who are in a situation where they still get to see their kid, how do you stop the resentment and the anger that you naturally may have against your child who's being manipulated, and how give them some advice on how to deal with that?
When you are able to spend time with your children, you have to spend time with your children, and they have to see you, and they have to learn you, and they have to understand who you really are. So if you're getting your kids for the weekend and you're dropping them off at your mama's house or your sister's or whatever, dropping them off to play with their cousins, and you're off doing your own thing, they're not learning anything about you from that experience, because you're not filling in the gaps with your fatherhood and your personal presence. So,
but the resentment is building. If they're so angry, how can you tell them not to? It's easier said than done.
That resentment is building.
Okay.
So if you're not doing anything to contradict the information that they're getting, then that resentment will continue to build. And those stories they're being told from the other side will be reinforced by your absence. You don't fight resentment with resentment. You have to fight the resentment they're being fed with conduct that is contrary to what they're being fed. So if the mom says, hey dad, your dad is never around, he doesn't do anything for you, he doesn't care about you, then everything you do for every minute of your time with that child has to contradict that information. You have to say, look, we're not going to just do everything you want to do, but we're going to do things that enable me to show you who I am and what you mean to me. So it doesn't mean that every weekend I'm getting you, we're going to an amusement park, we're going to the toy store, we're going to whatever, and do all the fun things. I'm going to parent you when you're with me. I'm not just going to pamper you. I'm not just going to, be the good cop and send you back home the bad cop.
Right.
No, I'm going to parent you during these times. If you screw up while you're with me, you're going to get disciplined.
Right.
If you got homework to do over the weekend, you're going to get it done.
Right.
But I'm not here just to be your buddy. I'm here to be your father.
But how do you also take care of you? What mental space and because for me, I would tell the man to find some form of, before they get with the child, maybe, let's say you're going to get them on a Saturday. Maybe that Friday, you as a man treat yourself to something good. Make yourself really happy. Do something that's going to satisfy you. Be with whoever you want to be with. If it's a new girlfriend, or boyfriend, people love who they love. Find happiness 24 hours before you meet with your child to just kind of help you stay in a positive space, because you're going to deal with some pushback. Is there any other advice that you would give?
Make sure whoever is in your life when during the time that you spend away from your kids is affirming you. Because we don't always get to affirm ourselves. Sometimes we need that external affirmation. One of the things that's helped me is that I live with people and I'm around people who remind me of my worth when I sometimes forget. Those people who are in this house remind me that I'm a good person, that I have something valuable to offer, that I have gifts. And it doesn't have to be an intimate partner. It doesn't have to be your new girlfriend or your whatever. It can be a coworker. It can be somebody who just digs you for the person that you are. If you don't have affirmation in your own life aside from your children, then you have nothing. You don't have that energy to pass on to your children. So if you're still struggling with this or that and you got nobody telling you that you're worth it, then when you get your kids and you're not feeling the way you should feel about yourself, then your kids aren't going to go away thinking this guy is a good guy. Because it's not going to be just because you say it.
Right.
It's going to be because you believe it, because it's reinforced outside of your time with your kids.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
Okay, so now let's get through. Now you're divorced. You get through that. How do you get back to even thinking about being single again? And are you thinking about being single, spending time to get to know yourself, or do you already start thinking about marriage again?
You start thinking about you first, and you start thinking about you instead of thinking about them. That's the problem. Initially, all your thoughts revolve around, what did I do wrong? Or how could this person do this to me? What do I do next? Where do I go? Who do I see? Right? But that's all external, right? It's all about what happened. You have to get to a place where you start thinking about, what can I do today? What can I do for me? What can I do at this moment? What can I do tomorrow? What can I do the next day? And it becomes a daily process of internalizing your own worth, your own purpose, your own value. And then when you get to a point where you remember who you are, then you can go out and share yourself with the rest of the world. But until you remember who you are, and you wallow in that despair of rejection, separation, disillusionment, anxiety, and I did it. I went through that process until you recognize who you are, and that's part of self-realization, part of external affirmation. Until you recognize who you are, you're going to be stuck there for a while. And it's like I said earlier, like it's the stages of grief. You know, the denial, the anxiety, the uncertainty, the disillusionment, the separation, remorse, and then you get to the acceptance. And once you get back to the acceptance, with acceptance comes reestablishing your confidence, reestablishing who you are and what made you attractive in the first place.
Okay. Is there anything, before we get to the music, we're going to get to the music next.
Eventually.
But is there anything you would like to say to young men, especially the young men? Because I feel like by us being older, we should give back as much as we can to the younger generation.
Yes.
If there was one thing that you want to say to them, if they're watching, what would it be?
Look at the people around you. Look at who you surround yourself with. And those people are going to be a part of your growth or part of your detriment. And especially when it comes to relationships. I am blessed and fortunate that I had people around me who were edifying and affirming and understanding. Also, people who've been through some things themselves. If you got friends for whom life is rosy and has always seemed to go their way and has always been in their favor, and they don't have any hardships to share with you when you're going through yours, you need some new friends. I'm not saying anything's wrong with those people.
Right. You just need to grow.
But they don't have anything to teach you.
Right.
They don't have anything to teach you. Get yourself some friends who've gone through some things, who've been through some battles. You know, get yourself some war-scarred friends, because war-scarred friends who've overcome. Not some war-scarred friends who are bitter and they stay wounded from battle. But get yourself some war-scarred friends who have overcome some things and found some goodness in their life.
Right. So like a mentor.
A mentor.
Try to find you a mentor.
Find yourself a mentor, or be around some people that you can say, hey, I'm going through this, and they can say, you know what, I've gone through it too, and here's what I did. It may not work for you, but here's what I did. And someone who can say, hey, I know you. You're better than that. You know, you're going to bounce back because, and have them cite some things they really know about you that you can feel good about. You know, I get that. I get that every day. Fortunately for me, everybody does not.
And you have to do it for yourself too. I always hit everyone over the head with this, that self-love. You got to face your demons.
Yes,
you got to face your issues. You have to spend time with yourself.
Yes.
You have to get to know yourself. Don't always keep yourself surrounded with people to escape.
Right.
You have to learn how to deal with your issues. And if
Yeah.
you can't do it, professional help.
Yeah.
Find a
Professional,
group.
yeah.
You know, if you can't afford, you know, a professional, find a group, like you said, who's going through what you're going through. There's so many groups out here.
If you're a
Find
person
group.
of faith, talk to someone in your church who you respect that can give you some words of wisdom, whether it's, make sure it's a combination of both faith-based and experience-based. Because if you got one of those church friends that's only quoting you scriptures, they're not helping the whole you. But if you've got somebody who can give you some words of wisdom from your shared faith, plus some words of wisdom from their lived experience, then you got a friend who can help you navigate. But if they're only giving you, you know, worldly anecdotes, or if they're only giving you scriptural reference, then they're not going to help the whole you, because you're not just a spiritual being and you're not just a worldly being. Now, this is coming from somebody who has a faith life and a real experience life. And these gray hairs means that I have a real experience life to go with my faith life.
And let's talk about your experience life. Let's talk about the musician in you and how you've been able to travel all over the world. And so tell them a little bit about that.
That's a great segue, because that explains how I'm able to navigate these spaces, because you need an outlet. And fortunately, my outlet has not only been a place of peace, but a livelihood.
Okay.
And so, you know, having traveled the world and seen different things, different cultures, different types of people, different ways of life, it allows me to put some things in perspective. You know.
So when it comes to music, what's your instrument? I see horns and guitars and keyboards.
When it comes to instrument, and I'm a third generation musician, my instrument is whatever I can get my hands on.
Okay.
I'm most known as a bassist, but I'm also known as a trumpeter, and I sing, and I've been known as a percussionist even on some occasions. My key skills are rudimentary, but I get the job done. Thanks to studio technology, I can lay down my structures and then build great melodies around those structures with music. So my influences are Latin jazz, being of a Cuban descendancy. My mother was an amazing soprano vocalist and keyboardist, as was her mother. My grandfather, who came from Cuba back in the 30s, 40s, was an accomplished musician as well. That's kind of how my grandmother and my grandfather met. And so now I grew up on Motown, 70s R&B, 80s R&B, and I've listened to everybody from Miles Davis to Prince, and so that's what caused me to reach out for different sounds and different textures and different styles of music. Shout out to the late great De Puentes, Celia Cruz, but modern day greats like Marcus Miller, the amazing immortal Stevie Wonder, all of those people, and more contemporary, you know, everybody from Jill Scott to Anthony Hamilton to Lettucey. You know, even some people you may not know, Cy Smith. There's a lot of great artists that have influenced me that I've had the pleasure to work with, still desire to work with, and that's what keeps me going. So you'll hear a lot of different elements in my music, everything from Latin to funk, to R&B, to jazz, to pop, and even some gospel.
And the track that I loved, what was it called again? That I sent you. I heard the first track.
The first track that I think got your attention was an interlude that showed my multi-instrumentalist capabilities, called Bow Tie. It's a little 1 minute interlude.
You're going to be listening to it, by the way.
You're going to be listening to it, and I transitioned from trumpet to a fretless bass, which is a little bit different than a fretted bass that you hear on most R&B records, and just kind of show how I bring the elements of the different things I do into a single piece.
We're going to do for you, we're going to create a playlist where it's just seamless, beautiful, sexy, grown and sexy music that you'll be able to listen to when you're cleaning your house. I know I love to listen to some music when I'm cleaning the house, having some wine, when you're taking a bubble bath, men and women, bubble baths.
Entertaining the person of your choice.
Exactly. You'll have this great playlist in the backdrop, and then where can they find your music?
Well, my previous project, which is under my band label, Third Scenario, is on all the outlets already. It's been out there for about a decade.
Okay.
Third Scenario. The name of that CD is called It's About Time. I had a musical collaborating partner. We worked together for like 14 years, and we put out what I think is still a great piece of music. So that's It's About Time from Third Scenario. The upcoming project, which is my solo debut, is going to be called Front and Center.
Okay.
And that is just about me coming out full circle, front and center by myself. And it's going to be semi-collaborative, but you'll find me playing pretty much most of the instruments. There may be a vocal appearance here and there from another artist. Shout out to Keith and Candace Williams, a husband-wife team who partnered to put a beautiful rhythm and string arrangement on my Latin adaptation of Stevie Wonder's Creepin', which I'm really proud of, even more so with the flavor they've added to it.
Okay, we're going to hear that.
You're going to hear also my adaptation of a really popular tune that I've come to love over the last 20-some years called Anytime, Any Place by Janet Jackson.
Okay.
That was written with Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jam, two of my musical heroes.
Okay.
From the time I was a teenager listening to The Time. So those two, and then some of my original compositions that are going to be on this. So Front and Center, the title comes from my time in the military. When it was time for you to be recognized, promoted, decorated, new medal on your chest, they will call you Front and Center. And that's your time to be recognized and honored and awarded or promoted. So this is my time to be recognized, awarded, honored, promoted as an individual, and I'm coming front and center. So that's the project I'm going to be bringing to you guys as soon as it's finished. It's almost finished.
I really appreciate you taking the time to, one, remind me how we knew each other.
Yes.
And two, for just being so open-minded to talk to the audience from a male perspective, because I know that's very vulnerable. But I always say sharing is caring.
And when you're a creative person like you and I are, whether you're a writer or a host or a marketer, sometimes talking about it, writing about it is the best therapy.
Yes.
Because you get it out of you and you're able to share it with someone else who it might be helping. So
that's the reason why I do this channel.
This has been helping. Let me tell you something. Miss Charlotte has great information, whether you're a young woman, a seasoned woman, or a man who wants to know more about the mind and heart of women. Check it out, subscribe. Trust me, I'm not just a guest. I am a subscriber and I am a commenter on the content of this channel, and this is an official endorsement. I'm nobody, okay? You may not have ever heard of me, but I approve this message. I approve this message.
And I appreciate that. I just feel like we're at a time now where authenticity is everything, and we need to share as much as we can. And from earlier what you were saying, hindsight, and you guys know I always say this, hindsight can be a bitch, but hindsight can also be a blessing. It could be a blessing for your foresight if you just take the time to listen to other people and their experiences. And when they're just trying to share some things with you, it's not always about being glamorous and being famous. No. It's about people, real people, sharing with real people because we care.
Right.
Too often you hear people say, well, somebody would have told me. Well, we're telling you.
these gray hairs and this more than half century on this planet, I've got something to share with you.
Yeah.
So,
so we're going to share your music, and we're going to have everything in the description. And hopefully this was really good for some male out there. If there's anything you want to say, please leave it in the comment section. If you have a question for Scott, he is a subscriber and he is really into the whole YouTube channel. He will comment, and he will comment to you as well. So if you have some questions for Scott,
to be honest.
Yeah, if you have some questions for Scott, leave it in the comment section. And as always, I say, we can agree to disagree. Just keep it cute. Any hate, it will get deleted. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, please subscribe and share this video with someone you care about, especially if there's a man in your life who you know is either about to get married or is getting separated or is going through a divorce. Share this with him so that he knows that he's not alone. He may need to hear this. So share this with him. If you're watching this on my Facebook page, please like my page and share. And if you're watching this on my IGTV, please follow and share. And until next time, I'll see you later.